The sun hung low over the city, its fading glow casting long shadows through the streets. Inside Cross Liquors, the light filtered through the dusty storefront, reflecting off rows of neatly arranged bottles. The air was thick with the familiar scent of aged whiskey and oak, a quiet comfort in a world that never seemed to stop shifting. Darius Cole stood behind the counter, arms crossed, his sharp eyes scanning the street beyond the glass. He had spent years in places where silence was dangerous, where every movement meant something, and where instincts were the only thing keeping a man breathing. That feeling never left him. Even now, in the so-called peace of civilian life, he knew when something was off. The bell above the door chimed, its soft ring almost lost in the sudden weight that settled in the room. Trouble had arrived. Sergeant Victor Kane and Officer Eric Lawson. Darius didn't need to look twice. He had seen their type before, men who carried themselves like kings, who mistook their badges for crowns. Kane walked in first, his broad frame moving with an unsettling ease, the gleam of his polished badge catching the light. His partner, Lawson, was younger, meaner, with the kind of arrogance that came from having too much power and not enough discipline. Darius didn't move, didn't speak. He had learned long ago that the first one to talk was usually the first one to lose. Lawson wandered toward the whiskey aisle, fingers grazing the labels as if he were taking inventory of his own stock. Kane, meanwhile, took his time, stepping up to the counter and leaning in, his voice smooth, practiced. "Relax, Cole," he said. "We're just stopping by, checking in on businesses in the neighborhood." Darius held his gaze. He didn't believe in coincidences. Kane's smirk widened. "City's making some changes, new rules, new expectations. We make sure everything runs smooth around here, and smooth costs money." Lawson scoffed, lifting a whiskey bottle, tilting it against the light. "Some businesses don't know how lucky they are," he muttered, his gaze flicking toward the black-owned business sticker near the register. Darius understood the game. He just wasn't playing. Without a word, he snapped the register shut, the sound cutting through the air like a gunshot. "I'll pass." Silence stretched between them. Then, with deliberate ease, Lawson let the whiskey bottle slip from his fingers. Glass shattered, whiskey spilled, a message sent. Kane adjusted his cuffs, his expression unreadable. Think it over? Then they were gone. Darius exhaled, his jaw tight. They had made their move. Now it was his turn. The scent of whiskey still lingered in the air long after Sergeant Kane and Officer Lawson had left. The shattered glass reflected the dim light overhead, sharp edges glinting like tiny warnings scattered across the floor. Darius Cole didn't move immediately. He just stood there, jaw tight, fists curled at his sides. He had seen this play before. This wasn't a threat, it was a promise. He exhaled slowly, then grabbed the broom from behind the counter and began sweeping up the shards. His movements were steady, controlled not because he wasn't angry, but because he refused to let them see him shaken. Outside, the city hummed with life. Cars passed, their headlights flashing across the store's glass front. People walked the sidewalks, some glancing at the liquor store, most not paying attention at all. Nobody wanted to get involved. Nobody ever did. By the time he locked up that night, the streetlights had flickered on, casting long, stretching shadows across the sidewalk. The metal shutter clanked as he pulled it down, securing it with a heavy padlock. His instincts told him to be ready for trouble. He should have listened harder. Darius woke to the sharp crack of glass breaking. The sound jolted him upright, breath steady even as adrenaline surged through his veins. He was on his feet in an instant, reaching for the gun he kept beneath his bed. Another crash. His mind worked fast. Front window, glass shattered, the store. Darius moved with trained precision, slipping on his boots, throwing on a jacket. He pushed through the back door, emerging into the alley, staying low as he advanced. The smell of spilled liquor hit him before he even stepped inside. His store was wrecked, shelves overturned, bottles smashed, their contents bleeding into the floorboards. Cigars from the display case scattered across the counter, some crushed under heavy boots. And then, a new problem. Near the back shelves, a small plastic bag sat torn open, white powder dusting the floor. A setup. Plain and simple. Darius clenched his jaw. They weren't just sending a message anymore, they were trying to bury him. The moment stretched, his heartbeat steady. He knew what came next. Right on time, the wail of patrol cars echoed through the streets, growing louder, closer. This wasn't a coincidence. They had planned this from the start. As the first set of headlights washed over the broken glass outside, Darius took a slow breath, forcing himself to stay calm. They wanted him to be there, standing in the wreckage like a guilty man. But he wasn't about to play their game. He needed to move fast. The sirens grew louder, closing in like a tightening noose. Darius Cole knew exactly how this was going to play out. The cops weren't coming to investigate, they were coming to arrest him. They had set the trap, and now they were here to spring it. His mind worked fast. Stay, and he'd be found standing in the middle of a crime scene, next to planted drugs. Run, and they'd paint him as a fugitive. Either way, Kane and Lawson would have what they wanted: control. But Darius wasn't the kind of man who let others dictate his fate. He moved, fast. Slipping out the back of the store, he kept low, his boots silent against the pavement as he ducked into the alley. The night air was thick with the scent of gasoline and distant rain. His heart beat steady, his breathing controlled. He had been in worse situations. As he rounded the corner, he heard the squad cars screech to a stop in front of his store. Doors slammed, boots hit the pavement. "Cole!" Kane's voice rang out, smooth and confident, like a man who already thought he'd won. "You in there? We got a call about a disturbance." A pause. "Would be a shame if we found something illegal." Darius didn't stop moving. He had seconds, maybe less. Then a sound behind him. Footsteps. Close. He twisted, barely dodging as a shadow lunged from the darkness. A fist swung toward his head. He ducked, pivoting on instinct. Another blow came. Darius caught the attacker's wrist, twisting hard. The man let out a sharp grunt, stumbling forward. But before Darius could finish him, another figure rushed him from the side. An ambush. They were waiting. Kane wasn't just trying to arrest him. He wanted Darius broken. The second officer struck, aiming low. Darius absorbed the hit, using the momentum to roll, his body twisting as he sprang back to his feet. Another attacker came in a baton swinging toward his ribs. He barely managed to block it, pain shooting up his arm. But pain was nothing new. Darius countered immediately, driving an elbow into the first officer's jaw, sending him sprawling against the alley wall. He turned just in time to catch the second man by the collar, yanking him forward and slamming his head against a dumpster. The third man, Lawson, smirking, gun drawn. Too late. A sharp crack echoed through the alley as something struck the back of Darius's head. His vision blurred, knees buckling. The last thing he heard before the world tilted sideways was Kane's voice, low and satisfied. "Told you you'd regret that, Cole." Then darkness. Pain. A deep, dull throb pulsed through Darius Cole's skull as he drifted back to consciousness. The world around him was slow to come into focused darkness. The scent of damp asphalt. The metallic taste of blood in his mouth. His wrists ached, bound tight behind his back with zip ties, his shoulders pulled awkwardly. Then, the voices. "Should have just taken the deal." Sergeant Victor Kane's voice smooth, smug, the sound of a boot scuffing against pavement. But nah, had to be a hero. "Didn't you?" Darius didn't answer. He was still assessing. Where was he? How many men? Was he in the back of a squad car? A holding cell? Number. Still outside. He could feel the cool night air against his skin, the rough texture of pavement beneath him. A warehouse district? The back of an alley? Somewhere off the books. They didn't want him processed. They wanted him gone. Another voice, Lawson. Younger, meaner. "I say we put him in the system. Let him rot with the kind of guys who hate ex-military types." A chuckle. "Might be fun to watch." Kane sighed. "Nah, you know how that goes. He gets a lawyer, makes noise. We don't need noise. We need him out of the way." A pause. Then a familiar sound, a gun being loaded. Darius acted, fast. He threw his weight sideways, using the momentum to kick out hard, knocking Lawson's legs from under him. The younger cop hit the ground with a grunt, his gun skidding across the pavement. Darius rolled, twisting his bound wrists, feeling the plastic bite into his skin as he moved. Kane cursed, reaching for his weapon, but Darius was already moving. Boots hit the pavement, a sharp pivot, a kick to the knee. Kane staggered. Darius didn't hesitate. He wrenched his arms forward, the zip ties snapping under sheer force and leverage. Free. One move, swift and brutal, he grabbed Kane by the collar and slammed his head into the side of a dumpster. The man crumpled. Lawson was already scrambling for his gun, but Darius wasn't giving him the chance. He lunged, snatching the weapon first, flipping it in his grip. Cold steel, familiar weight. Lawson froze, hands up. "Come on, man. You don't want to do this." Darius exhaled, gun steady. "You tried to kill me." Silence stretched. Then, the distant sound of sirens. They had backup coming. Darius didn't have time to waste. He moved. He spotted an idling police cruiser, the driver's side door still open. A mistake. Their mistake. He sprinted toward it, vaulting inside just as shouts erupted behind him. Engine on, tires screeching. As the squad car tore through the night, Darius reached for the onboard laptop, his fingers moving fast. Then, his gaze caught something in the cup holder. A police-issued phone. Lawson's phone. He grabbed it, eyes scanning the screen. Messages, encrypted files, evidence. Darius's grip tightened around the wheel. They had tried to bury him. Now, he had everything he needed to bury them instead. The stolen squad car tore through the empty streets, its flashing lights off, blending into the night. Darius Cole's grip was tight on the wheel, his pulse steady despite the chaos. The city blurred past in streaks of neon and shadow, but his focus was locked on the police-issued phone in his hand, Lawson's phone. He had spent years dismantling criminal networks overseas, hunting men who thought they were untouchable. It was different now. The battlefield had changed, but the rules? The rules were the same. Find the enemy's weak spot, strike, end them. The phone's encrypted messages flickered across the screen as he scrolled. Coded phrases, wire transfer receipts, names. His stomach tightened as he realized just how deep this went. This wasn't just Kane and Lawson. This was bigger. The text painted a clear picture: illegal weapons sales, money laundering, property seizures. The cops weren't just extorting small businesses for protection money. They were dismantling entire neighborhoods, forcing out Black and Latino owners, making way for high-end developments. And at the center of it all, one name kept appearing: Ethan Caldwell, a powerful real estate mogul, a name Darius recognized not from personal encounters, but from whispered conversations among business owners, from the news reports about sudden land acquisitions, from the quiet unease in the community. Caldwell wasn't just benefiting from this operation. He was running it. Darius's jaw clenched as he scrolled further. Another message thread. This one from Kane himself. Shipment secured. Same deal as last time. Expect delivery Tuesday. Cleanse the block. Caldwell doesn't want heat right now. His fingers tightened around the phone. This wasn't just a group of dirty cops. This was organized, controlled. The people running this weren't just criminals with badges. They were enforcers for the men in suits who didn't want their hands dirty. Darius's mind worked fast. He had enough to start taking them down, but he needed help, someone who knew the system from the inside. He reached for the police radio, switching to a secure frequency. A voice crackled through the static. "Reed. Marcus Reed, a detective, one of the few good ones left." "It's Cole," Darius said, keeping his voice low, measured. "We need to talk." A pause, then Reed's voice, wary but listening. "Jesus, Cole, do you have any idea how much heat is on you right now?" Darius's gaze flicked to the rearview mirror. No flashing lights, no tail, not yet. "Yeah," he said, "and that's why I called." The rain had started by the time Darius Cole pulled into the abandoned lot, his headlights cutting through the misty darkness. He killed the engine and stepped out, scanning the perimeter. A single car sat waiting, Detective Marcus Reed, leaning against the hood, his face barely visible beneath the dim glow of a nearby street lamp. "You must be out of your damn mind," Reed muttered as Darius approached. "You know every cop in the city is looking for you, right?" Darius pulled Lawson's stolen police-issued phone from his jacket and tossed it to him. "They should be looking at this instead." Reed caught the device, his brow furrowing as he unlocked the screen. He started scrolling. The moment the names and transactions flashed across the display, his expression darkened. "This?" Reed exhaled sharply. "This is bigger than I thought." His eyes flicked up to Darius. "Illegal seizures, gun running, laundering through real estate firms. Hell, this isn't just corruption. This is racketeering. Caldwell's the head of the snake, Darius said. Kane and Lawson are just foot soldiers. Reed let out a low curse. We can't go through the department. The moment this leaks, they'll bury it. He ran a hand through his hair, thinking. Then he looked up. There's a warehouse on the outskirts of town. It's where they move the shipments before they disappear into Caldwell's developments. If we can get proof of what's inside, we can take this federal. Darius didn't hesitate. Then that's where we go. The warehouse was built like a fortress-high fences, security cameras, armed guards patrolling the lot. These weren't just cops protecting a dirty operation. These were mercenaries, ex-military types who knew how to handle themselves. Darius and Reed crouched behind a stack of shipping crates across the street, watching. You really planning to go in there alone? Reed whispered. Darius gave him a look. Of course he was. Reed sighed. I'll be in the car. If you don't make it out in 10 minutes, I assume you're dead. Darius smirked. Then keep the engine running. He moved fast, slipping through the fence at a blind spot between security cameras. The rain softened the sound of his footsteps, masking his approach. He took down the first guard swiftly, a precise chokehold. Silent, efficient. Moving through the stacked shipping containers, he found what he was looking for. A ledger, half open on a table inside the storage office. Wire transfers, property seizures, police payrolls. This was it. Then a voice behind him. Well, well, a man sneered. Didn't think we'd see you again, Cole. Darius turned. The ambush had already begun. Darius Cole stood motionless, his muscles coiled like a spring, his mind already running through the next 5 moves. 3 men stood in the doorway of the warehouse office, their weapons drawn. Their leader, a stocky enforcer with a jagged scar down his cheek, grinned like a man who thought he had already won. Didn't think we'd see you again, Cole, the man sneered, cocking his pistol. Kane said you might be dumb enough to come snooping around. Guess he was right. Darius exhaled, slow and steady, keeping his hands relaxed at his sides. He could tell they weren't cops. These men didn't carry themselves like law enforcement, they moved like mercenaries. Caldwell's private security. Drop the gun, Scarface ordered. Darius didn't move. Instead, his gaze flickered past them, mapping out the space. Narrow room, 1 exit, no cover. The odds weren't great, but he'd had worse. The moment Scarface took a step forward, Darius moved. His hands shot up, slamming the nearest man's wrist and twisting the gun from his grip. A sharp elbow to the face sent the second attacker stumbling backward. Gunfire erupted too close, too loud, but Darius was already diving low, rolling behind a metal desk as bullets shredded the wall behind him. He grabbed the ledger, the only real proof he had, and ran. The chase was on. Darius sprinted through the warehouse, weaving between stacked crates as gunfire echoed behind him. A bullet whizzed past his ear. Another shattered a crate beside him, spilling stolen firearms onto the floor. He had to get out. Bursting through a side door, he emerged into the rain-soaked night. The sound of sirens blaring in the distance made his stomach tighten. They weren't just chasing him now. The whole city was. His eyes locked onto a nearby motorcycle, left idling outside. He took it. Tires screeched against the wet pavement as he gunned the throttle, the roar of the engine swallowed by the chaos behind him. He tore through the back alleys, weaving through darkened streets, heart pounding. Then his phone buzzed, a single message from an unknown number. They took Maya. Darius's grip on the throttle tightened. Now, it was personal. The roar of the motorcycle's engine echoed through the empty streets, but Darius Cole barely heard it. His mind was already locked onto one thing, Maya. The message had been short. No threats, no warnings. Just a statement of fact. They took Maya. His grip tightened on the handlebars as he tore through the rain-slicked roads. He had known this was coming. Kane wasn't the type to let a loose end dangle. And Maya Williams, the one woman who had risked herself to help expose them, was a loose end. Darius didn't have time to wonder where they were keeping her. The answer came through another message, this time from Sergeant Kane himself. You want her back? Come alone. Train yard, midnight, a trap, obviously. But that didn't change a thing. Maya was in danger, and he wasn't going to let Kane decide how this ended. He gunned the throttle, weaving between traffic, rain streaking across his visor like cracks in the night. The place was exactly what he expected, an old freight yard on the outskirts of the city, abandoned for years, Rows of rusting train cars lined the lot, their hulking frames casting long shadows under the dim floodlights. Darius killed the engine a block away, moving the rest of the way on foot, silent, invisible. Then he saw them. Kane stood near the center of the yard, arms crossed, his smug confidence unmistakable. Maya was on her knees beside him, her hands bound behind her back, her face bruised but defiant. She wasn't broken, not yet. 2 of Kane's men flanked her, both armed. Another 2 were positioned farther out, using the train cars for cover. Snipers. Darius exhaled slowly. They weren't taking chances. "Right on time," Kane called out, his voice laced with amusement. "Figured you wouldn't be dumb enough to run." Darius stepped forward, his posture calm despite the storm inside him. "Let her go," Kane chuckled. "You don't get to make demands, Cole." He nodded to his men. "But since you're here, might as well make this interesting." One of the guards yanked Maya to her feet. Darius's finger twitched toward his gun, but he forced himself to stay still. Too many angles, too many guns pointed at him. Kane smirked. "Here's the deal. You drop your gun, get on your knees, and maybe I let her walk out of here." Darius held his gaze. "You're lying." Kane grinned wider. "Yeah, probably." The second the words left his mouth, Darius moved. The moment Sergeant Kane smirked, Darius Cole knew he wasn't walking away from this without a fight. His body moved before his mind had fully processed it, training taking over, instincts firing. In one swift motion, Darius yanked his gun from its holster and fired. The first shot took the nearest guard in the shoulder, sending him spinning back with a grunt of pain. The second shot shattered a floodlight above, plunging part of the train yard into darkness. Chaos erupted. Gunfire cracked through the air, sparks flying as bullets slammed into metal train cars. Maya hit the ground, rolling away from Kane's grip as the distraction gave her a second of freedom. Darius moved fast, darting behind a rusting freight car. He counted the angles, 2 snipers, 2 guards left standing, and Kane somewhere in the shadows, waiting. He had been outnumbered before, and he had always survived. A shot rang out, inches from his head. He ducked, then fired back, forcing the shooter behind cover. Rain pounded against the steel of the train cars, mixing with the distant wail of sirens. Somebody must have heard the shots. But Darius wasn't waiting for backup. This was his war to finish. A figure rushed him from the side, one of Kane's guards, a heavy-set enforcer with a pistol raised. Darius sidestepped at the last second, grabbing the man's wrist and twisting hard. The gun fired into the sky before Darius drove a sharp elbow into the man's temple, dropping him cold. Another movement, Maya. She had managed to free her hands, using the moment to grab a discarded gun. Her breathing was shaky, but her grip was firm. She wasn't just surviving, she was fighting back. And then, Kane stepped into the open. Darius barely had time to react before the first punch landed. Kane moved fast, slamming a fist into his ribs, knocking the wind from his lungs. But Darius had fought men like him before. He retaliated. A brutal uppercut, a knee to the gut, then a sharp elbow across Kane's face. Kane stumbled back, wiping blood from his split lip, laughing. "You think this changes anything?" Kane spat, his voice rough. "There's always another guy waiting to take my place." Darius grabbed Kane by the collar, slamming him against the train car. "Then I'll take them down too." The sirens were close now. This was over. Kane had lost. The sirens grew louder, flashing red and blue lights cutting through the rain-soaked night. Darius Cole didn't let go of Kane. Not yet. He could feel the man's pulse racing beneath his grip, his breath ragged from the beating he had just taken. But Kane still had that damn smirk on his face, blood dripping from the corner of his mouth. "You think this is over?" Kane rasped, his voice edged with something close to amusement. "I wasn't the only one pulling strings, Cole. This city's bigger than you." Darius tightened his grip on Kane's collar, shoving him harder against the rusted metal of the train car. "I know," Darius said evenly, "but you won't be around to watch the rest fall." The tires screeched as FBI agents and local police swarmed the train yard, weapons drawn. The fight was over, and Kane knew it. A pair of officers grabbed him, yanking him away from Darius, slamming him onto the ground as they cuffed him. Maya stepped up beside Darius, rubbing at her wrists where the zip ties had dug into her skin. She was bruised, exhausted, but standing. That was reckless, she muttered. Darius exhaled, rolling his shoulders. Yeah, but it worked. They both watched as Kane was dragged toward the waiting SUVs, his arrogant demeanor finally slipping as the weight of his situation settled in. Just then, Detective Marcus Reed appeared through the cluster of agents, his gaze flicking between the wreckage of the shootout and Darius. "Damn, Cole," he muttered. "You sure know how to make a mess." Darius gave a dry chuckle, wincing slightly from his bruised ribs. Had to get their attention somehow. Reed sighed, then held up a stack of documents in his hand. "We got it all. Caldwell's financial records, proof of the property scams, the gun-running operation, the whole machine is coming down." Darius nodded, glancing at Kane one last time, as the dirty cop was shoved into the back of an armored SUV. For the first time in a long time, he felt something close to peace. Maya nudged his arm. "So what now?" Darius took a deep breath, feeling the city around him still broken, but no longer beyond saving. "Now," he said, glancing at the rising sun in the distance, "we rebuild." Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. See you in the next one. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. See you in the next one.